Story 1. The Empty Bunk. My name is Ryan Carter, and this happened during my freshman year at Ashwood State University in northern Pennsylvania. I'd never lived away from home before. The campus was beautiful during the day. Old brick buildings, huge oak trees, and a hostel that looked more like a century-old hotel than student housing. But the moment my parents drove away, everyone I met had the same strange piece of advice. Whatever you do, don't sleep in the bottom bunk if the top bunk is empty. I laughed every single time someone said it. I figured it was just another college prank meant to scare freshmen. I wish that's all it had been. Room 214 was on the second floor of Hawthorne Hall. It wasn't fancy. 2 metal bunk beds, 2 wooden desks, 1 narrow window overlooking the parking lot, and walls so thin I could hear people laughing 3 rooms away. My roommate was supposed to be a guy named Ethan Brooks. His side of the room was already unpacked. Clothes hung neatly in the closet. Textbooks were stacked on his desk. A framed photo of him with his parents sat beside a small lamp. Everything suggested he'd been living there for days. Everything. Except Ethan himself. The resident assistant shrugged. He went home for the weekend. So he'll be back Sunday? Probably. That answer sounded oddly uncertain. Around 1 in the morning, I woke up to a metallic squeak. It sounded exactly like someone climbing the hostel bunk bed. The frame creaked. The mattress above me slowly compressed. Someone had just climbed into the upper bunk. Half asleep, I smiled. Ethan? No answer. I figured he didn't want to wake me. I rolled over and went back to sleep. The next morning, the top bunk was perfectly made. No wrinkles. No pillow indentation. Nothing. I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Monday arrived. Still no Ethan. Tuesday. Nothing. Wednesday. Still gone. The strange part wasn't his absence. It was everyone's reaction. Students kept saying things like, I passed Ethan in the hallway this morning. He was in the laundry room last night. I borrowed a charger from him yesterday. I even asked one guy, where exactly did you see him? He answered casually, inside your room. I stared at him. That's impossible. He laughed. Nice joke. But I wasn't joking. No one had entered room 214 except me. That Thursday night, the footsteps returned. Coming from directly above my head, the upper mattress groaned under invisible weight. I grabbed my phone. The time was 3:14 a.m. Then I heard breathing. Slow. Deep. Only a few feet above me. I switched on the flashlight. The top bunk was empty. The breathing stopped instantly. A second later, something knocked once from inside Ethan's closet. I didn't sleep again that night. The next evening, I went downstairs and spoke with the old night security guard. His name tag read Frank. Before I even finished explaining, his expression changed. He looked toward the elevators before lowering his voice. You live in 214? I nodded. He sighed. So you're hearing the bunk. My stomach tightened. You've heard it too? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, has anyone told you what happened to Ethan? No. Frank looked genuinely uncomfortable. Ethan never went home. He disappeared. 5 days before you moved in. I felt every hair on my arm stand up. But everyone says they've seen him. Frank slowly nodded. I know. Then he walked away. The hostel had security cameras covering every hallway. Frank quietly agreed to let me watch the recording from the previous night. At exactly 3:14 a.m., room 214's door opened. A young man walked inside. Dark hoodie. Backpack. Exactly matching Ethan's student ID photo. Neither Frank nor I spoke. We watched another 30 minutes of footage. Nobody came back out. Not once. The room had only one entrance. No windows large enough to escape through. Yet Ethan had vanished again. Frank immediately shut off the monitor. I've seen enough. That night, I decided I wasn't going to hide anymore. At exactly 3:10 a.m., I climbed onto the upper bunk myself. Nothing happened. 3 minutes passed. Silence. Then, the ladder rattled. Someone was climbing up toward me. I couldn't see anyone, but the metal frame shook with each step. 1, 2, 3. The invisible weight stopped beside my face. Something exhaled. Ice-cold air brushed across my cheek. Then a whisper. "So, you took my bed." I jumped down so fast I twisted my ankle. The room fell silent. The next morning, Frank met me outside with an old newspaper clipping. Ethan Brooks had gone missing 3 weeks earlier. Construction workers renovating the hostel's basement had discovered a narrow maintenance tunnel beneath room 214. Inside, they found Ethan's backpack, his phone, and finally, his body. Police believed he had accidentally fallen through a broken maintenance hatch while exploring the basement alone. His death had been kept secret until the investigation ended. No one knew why students kept reporting seeing him afterward. Frank looked at me and quietly said, "You're the 5th roommate assigned to that room." None of the others stayed longer than a week. I moved out the very same day. I never returned to Hawthorne Hall. About 6 months later, I received an email from another freshman. He'd somehow found my student contact information. The message was only one sentence. "Did Ethan ever sleep on the top bunk, or was that always yours?" Attached was a photo. Room 214, taken the night before. On the upper bunk, a young man was sleeping peacefully. On the lower bunk, another student stared at his phone, completely unaware that no one had been assigned the upper bed. Story 2. The Girl in Room 408. My name is Emily Foster, and this happened during my sophomore year when I transferred to Westbrook College in Oregon. Since I joined halfway through the semester, the only room left in the girls' hostel was room 406 at the very end of the 4th floor. As the hostel warden handed me my key, she stopped me before I walked away. "There are only 2 rules." I smiled. "No parties." She didn't smile back. "Rule 1, be inside before midnight." I nodded. "And rule 2. She hesitated. "If you ever hear someone knocking on the door of room 408, keep walking." I laughed, assuming it was some kind of initiation prank. Nobody else did. Room 406 sat just 2 doors away from room 408. The hallway was oddly quiet. Unlike the lower floors, there were no decorations, no bulletin boards, and barely any students. Room 408 looked different from every other room. Its paint was faded. A thick chain wrapped around the doorknob. A strip of faded yellow tape stretched across the frame. There wasn't even a room number on the door anymore. Just dark marks where the numbers had once been. When I asked my roommate, Sarah, what had happened there, she immediately changed the subject. "Just don't go near it." That night, I noticed something strange. Every student walking down the hallway instinctively crossed to the opposite side whenever they passed room 408. No one looked at it. Not even once. 3 nights later, at exactly 12:17 a.m., a soft knock echoed through the hallway. 3 slow taps. Knock. 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 I assumed someone had forgotten their key. Then it happened again. But this time, the sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside room 408. I looked toward Sarah. She had pulled her blanket over her head. "Ignore it," she whispered. The knocking continued for nearly 5 minutes. Then, silence. The next morning, every girl on the 4th floor acted as if nothing had happened. A week later, Sarah went home for the weekend, leaving me alone. At 12:17 a.m., the knocking returned. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped into the hallway. The corridor was empty. The knocking came from behind the chained door. Just as I reached it, a landline phone mounted on the hallway wall suddenly rang. I nearly screamed. Who still used a hallway phone? It rang over and over until I answered. A young girl's voice whispered, "Don't let her open the door." Then the line went dead. When I turned back toward room 408, the knocking had stopped. The next day, I visited the college library. After digging through old campus newspapers, I found an article from 2008. A fire had broken out on the 4th floor. One student had died. Her name was Lily Morgan, an 18-year-old freshman. According to the article, she had become trapped in her room after the hallway filled with smoke. The room number was blacked out in the scanned newspaper, but another article mentioned renovations after the fire. Only one room had been permanently sealed. Room 408. I showed the article to Sarah. She turned pale. "My sister lived here years ago." She said Lily still knocks. That Friday night, the hallway lights flickered just before midnight. The knocking returned, louder than ever. Instead of fear, I felt sympathy. What if someone really needed help? The heavy chain hanging from room 408 looked old. Rust had almost eaten through the links. I reached out. My hands shook as I lifted the chain. The metal clattered to the floor. For the first time in years, the doorknob turned. The door slowly creaked open. Inside, there was no furniture, only a layer of dust covering the floor. The room smelled like burned wood. The walls were stained black. It looked untouched since the fire. Then, the door slammed shut behind me. The room was completely silent, until I heard breathing. Not mine. Someone else's. Slow. Uneven. Coming from the corner where the closet stood. I aimed my phone flashlight toward it. The closet door was slightly open. Something shifted inside. I whispered, "Hello." No answer. Instead, a girl's voice softly said, "You shouldn't have come." The closet door swung open by itself. It was empty. But footprints began appearing in the thick dust, one after another, walking toward me. I backed against the wall until my shoulder hit an old mirror leaning face down. When I lifted it, my reflection wasn't alone. Standing behind me was a young girl. Long blonde hair. Burned skin. Her clothes were blackened by smoke. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring toward the door. Someone knocked. This time, from the outside of room 408. 3 slow knocks. A voice spoke through the door. "Emily." It sounded exactly like Sarah. "Open the door." I rushed toward it. Before I reached the handle, the burned girl grabbed my wrist. Her grip felt ice cold. She shook her head, then whispered, "That's not Sarah." The voice outside became impatient. "Emily, I know you're in there." The knocking grew violent. The entire door shook. Then, it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. The next morning, campus security found me unconscious inside room 408. The chain was still hanging exactly as it had been before. No one could explain how I had gotten inside. When I told them everything, they insisted I had experienced a stress-induced hallucination. A week later, I transferred to another university. I never returned. Almost a year later, Sarah mailed me a package. Inside was an old hostel yearbook. She had highlighted one photograph from the year before the fire. 4th floor residence. 23 girls smiled at the camera. In the back row, standing beside Lily Morgan, was me. Wearing the same hoodie I had owned during college. The date beneath the photo read, October 12th, 2007. I wasn't even born until 2005. And when I flipped the page over, someone had written in faded ink, "Thank you for not opening the door twice." Story 3, The Warden's Basement. My name is Jason Miller, and this happened during my second year at Redwood Technical Institute in Colorado. The boys' hostel was built in the early 1970s. It was old, noisy, and always smelled faintly of bleach and damp concrete. On my first day, the hostel warden, Mr. Collins, gathered all the new students. He wasn't a friendly man. He looked at us one by one before saying, "I only have one rule. No one goes into the basement after lights out." Someone laughed. Mr. Collins didn't. "If you hear noises, if you hear someone calling your name, if you hear someone crying, stay in your room." That warning should have been enough. It wasn't. My roommates were Brandon, Kyle, and Noah. For the first few weeks, life was normal. Then every night, right around 2:30 a.m., we started hearing scratching. Not on the walls. Not at the door. Under the floor. Like someone was dragging their fingernails beneath the concrete. At first, we blamed rats. Until one night the scratching stopped directly beneath Brandon's bed. 3 slow taps echoed from below. Tap. 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 Brandon jumped out of bed. The tapping followed him. Small things started disappearing. A loaf of bread. Instant noodles. Chocolate bars. Even unopened bottles of water. We blamed each other. Until Noah stayed awake one night. The next morning, he looked terrified. "I saw someone." We all laughed. He didn't. They crawled out from under the staircase. They weren't a student. They carried our food downstairs. When we asked why he hadn't followed them, he simply replied, "They weren't walking. They were crawling." A few nights later, Brandon noticed something strange. Every night at exactly 2:45 a.m., Mr. Collins left his office carrying an old lantern. Instead of making his usual rounds, he unlocked a small metal door beneath the main staircase. We'd walked past it hundreds of times. None of us had ever noticed it before. The moment he disappeared inside, the scratching stopped. Every single night. Something about that couldn't be a coincidence. So we made a terrible decision. We agreed to follow him. The next night, after Mr. Collins returned upstairs, we quietly unlocked the same door with a spare key Brandon had borrowed from maintenance. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. The air smelled like wet earth and rust. At the bottom was a concrete tunnel stretching farther than our flashlights could reach. Along both walls sat dozens of old suitcases. Every one of them had a student's name written on masking tape. Some names were recent. Some dated back 30 years. Inside the first suitcase we opened, there were clothes, textbooks, a wallet, a family photograph, everything someone would take to college. Everything. Except the owner. As we moved deeper into the tunnel, we began hearing whispers. At first, they were impossible to understand. Then they became clearer. Someone was calling our names. Softly. From different directions. Jason. Brandon. Noah. Kyle froze. "Did you guys hear that?" Before anyone answered, a flashlight beam appeared at the far end of the tunnel. Mr. Collins. He shouted, "Run!" Not at us. At something behind us. We turned around. At first, I thought the tunnel was empty. Then I saw movement. Dozens of pale figures slowly crawled out from the darkness. Their arms and legs bent at impossible angles. Their eyes reflected our flashlight beams like animals. None of them made a sound. They just crawled toward us. Slowly. Patiently. Then one of them smiled. And they all started running. We sprinted after Mr. Collins. He slammed a heavy steel gate behind us. The creatures crashed into it from the other side. The entire tunnel shook. When everything finally became quiet, Mr. Collins sat down against the wall. "I've been feeding them." None of us spoke. "If I don't leave food every night, they come upstairs." He explained that decades earlier, Workers had broken into an abandoned mining tunnel beneath the hostel. They found something living inside. It wasn't human. It never had been. The school secretly sealed the tunnels and paid one warden after another to keep the creatures underground. No police. No news reports. Just silence. Mr. Collins led us through an emergency exit that opened behind the maintenance building. We reached the surface just before dawn. Campus police searched the basement that morning. They found nothing. No tunnels. No gate. No suitcases. Just an empty storage room beneath the stairs. When we told them what happened, they assumed we had wandered into an old utility area and imagined the rest. Mr. Collins had resigned overnight. No forwarding address. No explanation. He simply disappeared. I graduated 2 years later and never looked back. Last fall, I received an email from an unknown address. There was no subject line, just one attached photo. It showed the basement storage room. Standing in the doorway was the hostel's new warden. Behind him, just barely visible in the darkness, were dozens of glowing eyes. At the bottom of the email was a single sentence. Someone has to feed them now. I never replied. But sometimes, late at night, I still wake up to the sound of 3 slow scratches beneath my bed. And for a few seconds, I can't convince myself that they're just coming from the house settling.